Hello, Ancestry cousins and Inquiring minds. This video is about benevolent funds and the competition with Undertakers back in the days. So I'm going to read an article first about my granduncle, Roy Cole. I had mentioned him before that he was in a book from the Deep River Friends, 1754 to 2004. And he was mentioned because they said that he used his mules and a team of men to move the stepping stone, which was used to step off of carriages or horses from one place to where it was already set up to another place where away from a road that they were going to build. So, and that is from that book. So that's what I'm saying about local history books. You may find your ancestors in those local history books. It does not necessarily mean they have to be Black history books, but they are mentioned there because they were a part of that Deep River Friends or Quaker community. Okay. So the article that I'm going to read is because he was a part of that community. And at one point, we weren't buried in certain cemeteries, so we had to have our own cemeteries. So there was these funds that were started so you could have money put aside. You put into it like a little assurance thing, so you could, when it's time for you to pass, it's taken care of. Your family is not left with that burden, especially when you didn't have a lot of money. So apparently, when I was searching for information, just general information for my great granduncle Roy Cole, these two articles came up, and I found that interesting. So these are the articles. So this is from Thursday evening, April 14, 1927. Not guilty is order of the court. Roy Cole acquitted on embezzlement charge. Promised interesting session. After hearing the testimony of one witness in the case of the state against Roy Cole, charges with embezzlement, Judge McElroy in Superior Court shortly before the noon recess Thursday directed a verdict of not guilty, with an imposing array of witnesses and with Judge S.B. Adams appearing with Solicitor Hines and the prosecution and Robert Fraser appearing for the defendant at the onset, which it appeared as if the case would be long drawn out. So I guess he came with somebody to defend him, and they thought it was going to be drawn out. Testimony of one witness was to the effect that some 200 Negroes living in the southwestern portion of the county had organized the burial association with the means of securing for the membership decent burial in the event of death, though membership contributions into general fund of which Cole was the banker. When a member died, the society met and ordered the secretary and banker to issue a check for the burial expenses. Something over $85 was banked in a High Point institution, and the organization met and ordered a check for $50 to be drawn for funeral expenses of a deceased member. Another check for $50, it was alleged, had been issued by Cole without authority, and the contention of the state was to be appropriated the fund of his own use with the intent of defrauding the organization. A.C. Parker was found not guilty for reckless. Oh, so that, I guess that's the end of that one. So let's go to the next one. The Burial Society head giving court verdict. Treasurer in Christian Benevolence Convectional Society, not embezzler. Judge directed verdict. Roy Cole, High Point Negro, did not embezzle the funds of the Christian Benevolence Convocational Burial Society. Okay, sorry. According to the directed verdict of not guilty by Judge Pender A. McElroy in Guilford Superior Court at noon yesterday, the judge made his ruling immediately after all the evidence was in and various members of society, was approximately 200 members, had done testified as to what they thought went with some funds, though had paid in to ensure proper burial when the Grim Reaper called. Ray Cole was, according to the evidence, a mighty high exalted officer of the society, which he was treasurer, member of the finance committee, and otherwise active. Approximately 200 Negroes in the southwestern section of the county, High Point Township, decided to organize a society on a plan of paying for in small sums as dues at regular intervals the money to be used to provide $50 funerals. Approximately $85 had been gathered when a member died. So they didn't have this much long, or a check was requested, but there was something was wrong. It was alleged that the treasurer had, without any authority, already drawn one $50 check on the account, and he can't get two 50s out of 85, even though the latter sum can be divided on a 50-50 basis. The defendant, duly indicated by a grand jury, contended the charges were all wet, and all the witnesses knew not thereof, they alleged. His defense was good enough to cause the directed verdict, which meant it was plenty tight. So basically, they were saying that he tried to embezzle some money from the Benevolent Society. So that goes to show, I was talking to Sean Rogers of the Mendenhall Society, and I actually just posted a video on my page when they had found out that they had a colored section in that cemetery that they had forgotten about because there used to be a fence. And as people passed, they just forgot about that section of the cemetery. And my second great grandmother is buried there. And when I went to High Point, it was a quick day trip, and I was around taking pictures, and I found that cemetery, but she wasn't there. She was somewhere else, and I knew that she was at that Quaker cemetery because I had got the information offline, and I actually took the picture. And it's a different picture that's what's online now because they cleaned it up. And so that was as time passes and I do more research, I can find more information on people that none of these people have this stuff in their tree. Not that it's important, but I think it just kind of tells a story about what was going on at that time, because that Turner Cemetery, that was, for that people that were associated with that church. But there may have been people that was down the road that didn't have a cemetery that, that needed to be closer to them. So they may have had little small cemeteries, or it could have been like the Quaker cemetery. They gave us a certain amount of land right there that they used for the colored cemetery. Okay, so I'm going to go on to something that I have found interesting, and I may have misspoken about this, and I want to make a correction if I did. So I thought that I said, because when I was following my great grandfather Daniel Keith, when he passed in DC, and I was looking at his death certificate, I thought that Jesse Barnes was his Undertaker. And when I was looking at something else, I mistook him and may have misspoken that for something that was negative against Jesse Barnes, the Undertaker. So I had to say, I apologize if I misspoke and said it was Jesse Barnes. That the person actually was an Undertaker named Addison Day. And how I think I got those confused too was I knew that there was an Addison Day, which just seemed to be a coincidence. That was on the 1900 census that I had to figure out what the name of the street was, which it ended up being Chews Alley. It's an Addison Day right on that census with him. And so the way I figured out was his father was an Undertaker. So let me go on to the story where I first, I also had said that I didn't know whether they had funerals in those houses. So I'm going to read this ad right here. This is from an announcement. This says this from a Chutney. Her name is Stepney. August 9th, 1876, after a long and painful illness. Charlotte A., wife of Andrew Stepney and daughter of John H. Chew, age 23 years. The funeral will take place from the residence of her father at number 113 Chew Alley between E and F Streets Northwest this Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock. relatives and friends are respectively invited to attend. So, and I spoke to my mother about it, and she said she did remember when she was a child that they did go to someone's house, a distant, well, a love relative. Because when she said the name, I was like, oh yeah, they wasn't real. They weren't real. We didn't figure that out already. So anyway, she does remember going to an in-house funeral. Okay, so to get that one over. So the Addison Day, when I first see his advertisements, he's Addison Day. His advertisements say he's a practical undertaker and cabinet maker. So I'm not going to go all into all of that. So what really had got me for him with what I started when I said the baby, I got to find that one right quick. Okay, this was from Monday, July 31st, 1876. A dead baby. About 7 o'clock last evening, Officer McKenna of the 1st Precinct carried to the station a coffin containing the body of a colored child, which some boys had discovered in an unoccupied feed store, corner of Maryland Avenue and 7th Street Southwest. The coffin was laid away in a back room of the station, and the coroner notified. About an hour afterwards, the child and the coffin were claimed by a colored undertaker named Addison Day, whose place of business is next door to said feed store. He produced a permit for its burial issued by the Board of Health and stated that the mother of the child was Jane W. Johnson, resided at D Street between 1st and 2nd Street Southwest, and that the child died on Friday last and was to be buried today. And on the account of the offensive smell, decomposition had set in and the coffin had removed temporarily when it was found by the boys. Lieutenant Gassford was very willing to be relieved of the custody of coffin and its contents and gladly turned over to the undertaker, who had carted back to his shop. And that just reading that ad disturbed me, because I was like, and sorry, Mr. Jesse Barnes, for getting you confused with this undertaker. So this undertaker, we're going to read a couple of ads. Undertaker, so this ad is from the Evening Star, Wednesday, October 28th, 1885. They may not be exactly in order, because I just wanted just to say, like, to read something to you. So that, when I told you the guy that I think that was living on the same census, because every time when I see something, I'm like, that's a coincidence. It never be a coincidence. Because you have to remember, a population of people at this time is not a large population of people. So the undertaker and liquor dealer, Addison Day Sr., fined by Judge Snell. Again, Judge Snell, his name keep coming up. Addison Sr., the colored undertaker and saloon keeper, was placed on trial in the police court today, charged with keeping an unlicensed bar at 346 Pennsylvania Avenue. Officer Costello testified that the sign over the door wrote Addison Day Jr. William Lewis, colored, testified that he has been visiting the saloon for some time past. On one occasion, he got a glass of gin and a glass of whiskey, and for a woman and a gentleman who were in the dining room. Witness always heard that defendant's son, who was about 14 years old, was the proprietor of the saloon. Rosemary Bell, colored, testified that he was in the defendant's place and bought liquor. Edward Coates, colored, testified that he had played billiards and drank whiskey and beer in the defendant's place. How long ago since you were in the saloon? Inquired Mr. Kerrigan. About 2 months, he replied. Do you know the month? Yes. What month is this? June, he answered. Samuel Newton, colored, testified that he had been in Day's saloon every night since last June and had drank whiskey, beer, and gin there. He ain't running like that. William Lancaster, Cullett testified that about 2 months ago, he drank a stovepipe of beer in the defendant's place, and the defendant waited on him. Licensed clerk Monteague testified that a license had been issued to Addison Day to sell liquor in quantities not less than 1 pint. The defendant testified that his son was the proprietor of the saloon. His son was about 14 years old, and the court imposed a fine of $105, and it was an appeal noted. Okay, so we have, this is from a bit of news from September 30th, 1885. Jeez. Addison Day, the colored undertaker of 301 C Street Southeast, was yesterday fined $255 for unlicensed pawnbroker. What happened here? Addison Day convicted. This is from June 2nd, 1888. Addison Day convicted. In the case of Addison Day, the colored man charged with keeping a disreputable house on 4th and Half Street between Missouri Avenue and Pennsylvania Avenue. Judge Montgomery yesterday instructed that the jury, if they were satisfied that even though the wife may have rented the house and paid the rent, still, if the defendant lived with her and was the head of the house executing control and management, that was sufficient for a conviction. A verdict of guilty was returned. Day is an undertaker of the profession and has previously been convicted of keeping an unlicensed pawn shop. So, but the whole point to this is, if you were a person living in the city and you hear about, say, it's like a good undertaker, like, that's my dad is an undertaker, or he probably wouldn't even say it. No, because if his dad was forcing him to run a liquor store, like a saloon at 14, and then when he's not living with his dad over in that area, he's living over in Choose Alley. And then later on, I follow him because, I'm nosy. I'll keep following them. And so I noticed that he's not using the name Addison anymore. He's using the name Babe Day. And I don't know where that came from. But, and I think that this is a part of the reason why, people have to be really careful with who they're speaking of and using as their undertakers and stuff. So it's actually a video that I saw recently on YouTube where the man is an older man and he takes a cane or a hammer or something and is beating the coffin because he wants to make sure that they're actually burying his loved one, his brother, in that coffin, and they're not taking him out and reusing it. I mean, that's something that's totally illegal. But, I guess that things like that get done. And so the baby, according to the things of embalming, I think within 24 hours, if they don't start, if the baby's not embalmed within 24 hours, then it starts to deteriorate. And even if a body is, and even after that, I think if it is, it may slow it down, but it still doesn't completely destroy it. Now, there was one more article that I wanted to talk about because it basically has something to do with the Benevolent Fund. So let me find that real quick. I almost forgot. The 2 Undertakers and One Corpse. In the police court today, Addison Day, a colored undertaker at 4th and C Street Southwest, was in the dock and charged with larceny of an ice box from Edward Nelson, another undertaker, of number 447 L Street Northwest. Mr. P.B. Stitchton appeared for the defendant and stated that a colored woman living on 9th Street between E and F Southwest died recently, and his client, Day, was employed by the deceased adopted son to bury her, and he took his ice box to the house and put the corpse in it. Edward Nelson, the complainant, was employed by the society that the deceased belonged to bury her and received his pay in advance. When Nelson arrived on the premises, he found the corpse in Day's icebox and was removed it from its own icebox and threw Day's icebox out into the yard in the mud. Day subsequently called and found things in this state, and he took Nelson's icebox to pay him for the service he rendered. He also said there was a civil suit already underway growing out of this case. Prosecuting attorney Moore said it was a wonder he could not take the corpse. He did not take the corpse. Mr. Moore admitted that the statement of counsel for the defense was correct. The court said, as he took the box openly before those present, and said he claimed to have a lien on it, and the case was purely a civil one, and he would a charge of larceny. I couldn't read it. Some of these newspaper articles are so dark. Some of them are so light. Some of them just kind of bleed together. But they all tell you those articles that I read you clearly gave you a character of this person that I would not want him to bury my dog. I'm just sorry. Like, I wouldn't trust him. So can you imagine when those boys found that baby in that feed store, then they go out into community and say they found a baby, and you know what I'm saying, and who did it end up getting around the community. So it probably did hurt his business for a while. And also something else that I did found too that I had to ask was because if they were having funerals in the house and they're building these coffins or caskets or whatever, this says I asked the AI, and it says that embalming was primarily conducted in the home of the deceased and often in the parlor or the kitchen. The undertaker and assistants would bring necessary equipment, including a portable table, a cooling board, and whatever else they needed to do that. So that was all I wanted to say. So these two, so that's either if we were using the benevolent funds to pay into like a type of insurance, or if we just had to get together money to give to an undertaker. In this book right here, Alley Life, it got so many little tabs in here. They talk about that if you died in the alley life, the people in the community would get together and take up funds. And so, by the end of the day, it would be taken care of. So, and that's that would be a good thing, because that would be one less thing that a person, because they already poor in the alley, so they have to be trying to scrape up money. That's good community work. So that's it on this video. I have other ones that I want to talk about, but I don't want to run them together. So to keep my thoughts together, because I'm going back and looking at these videos myself, so they can help me remember the sequence of orders of how I put these stories together. So I hope maybe this could help you to understand a little bit more about the articles that I read, or you can go in yourself. I use Chronicling America. I did find a couple of articles when I was looking at something else in the Washington Post, because I do have a subscription to that. But mostly Chronicling America is free, and it's the Library of Congress. So thank you for watching.